Prince Christian Hogan, I'm here with ZOOMGRANTS.
Catherine directly, I'm one of the technical assistance providers. It's listed in the RFP to provide support to small organizations.
Buenos dias, Denise Perez Valdez. I'm also a technical assistance provider doing the same thing and helping people
Good morning, I'm Mark Sullivan with the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs.
Tracy Jones, WDVA.
Elsa McGarry, WDVA. I'm Sarah Boyle with Pathfinding.
Diane McDougall Tracy, Sandeep Molly Valley Cities.
I'm Wilson from Valley Cities.
I'm Noah Kay. I'm with the county and I support the Veterans Seniors and Human Services Levy evaluation and public measurement.
Lifelong YWCA.
Allison Solid Ground.
My name is Heidi Hammes. I'm also with Del Centro Delaware.
Oliver, the Ukrainian Community Center.
On the phone?
And then we've got a few people on the phone here. I'll get us started us off, phone folks. We have Trish Crocker. Trish, would you mind introducing yourself?
Trish Crocker from Multi-Service Center.
Could you say that again? Was it Multi-Service Center? I believe it was Multi-Service Center. And then we have Steve Gill.
Correct. Steve Gill with
As soon as the Wi-Fi comes back to me, I'll get it. So, and then we have Nathan as well. Nathan, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, my name is Nathan Sturgis. I'm with Ada Healthcare.
Nathan Sturgis with Ada Healthcare. Thank you, Nathan. And then we've got a couple of guests. This can be the challenging part. Can you just jump in as best you can and let us know who you are?
Barbara Logan, WDVA.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah. Come on, listen.
Yeah.
Michael Nikitin with the Ada Healthcare Solutions.
Thank you, Michael. And yeah, we've got a few other guests. If you want to jump in, you're more than welcome to, but otherwise we can move on.
Okay. There is a sign-in sheet circulating, so please, if it doesn't come to your table, look for it. Make sure you sign by the end before you leave, because it is part of our public record, making sure that we can tell folks who've been informed, and we can also make sure that people remain informed. On the agenda today, the things that we will cover are what is the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy, an overview of these two strategies, the Pathfinder and the Navigation Strategy, an overview of the RFP and what it includes and the content of that, technical assistance that will be available, opportunities for partnership and collaboration that you can form on your own, how to work within ZOOMGRANTS, and then we'll have a question and answer session, and everything that's asked and answered during this will be transcribed and posted as an FAQ on the ZOOMGRANTS pages, so that all may benefit. So next, what is the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy?
Okay.
Is it, go quick, okay, we'll go straight to the one, yes. So it was passed by the King County voters in 2017 with about 69% approval rating. It assesses 10 cents per thousand valuation, brings in about 55 to 65 million annually. Within each population stream, veterans, seniors, and human services, it's around 18 to 20. Some of that then gets contracted out for community services, which is what this RFP is. The implementation plan, which was passed in 2018, approved by council, includes all of the strategies within the that will be contracted out, as well as those that will be conducted, within King County, by perhaps, the behavioral health or King County Veterans Program. And we will refer to the implementation plan strategies SS1A through F, which are pages about 120 of the implementation plan, and HS4, the housing stability strategies, about pages 60 of the implementation plan. We've provided an excerpt of them in your materials this morning, so you can actually see what the implementation plan says about these strategies. One of the guiding principles of the VSHSL, of the levy, is connection, belonging, and what can only the levy do. So connection, we recognize that our community is better when we are connected to each other. People receive better services when they have a connecting partner to help them get to services. And programs work better when they are connected and working together with each other. And systems are stronger when we have a very focused attention to bring partners together, to break down barriers, to really learn from each other and continue to improve the systems through our shared connections. Belonging, again, people feel better, do better, and make progress when they feel a sense of belonging, both within their neighborhood, with their familiar relationships, and we find even when they're working with their service provider, their case manager. That sense of being respected, being welcomed really makes a profound difference in the progress that people can make. And I'm not telling any of you anything you don't already know. What we're doing here is recognizing that and really trying to embed it in the RFP, in the contracting, and how we shape services and the connections that we're trying to build and support on the back end as well. I went too fast. What slide are we on now, Adam? I jumped in.
We're going to do equity and social justice.
Okay. So equity and justice. The King County and our strategic plan and our team and the levy has a very stated and committed goal of achieving equity and social justice in our community and ensuring that all people, regardless of who they are and where they live, have the opportunity to thrive with full and equal access to opportunities, power, and resources. And I can share that actually this is posted on our walls. We begin some of our meetings by reciting this, and we really are affirming that this is important. And specifically within this RFP, we seek to partner with organizations who are connected to those who face barriers due to historical and racial disproportionality and barriers to access. We are very specifically trying to work with those who have connections to women and transgender veterans, veterans of color, Native American veterans, military families, and people experiencing homelessness, because we recognize that those who are closely connected can really embrace and support the people on their journey. And what we are trying to do is ensure that those folks who have historically faced barriers to service have someone walking alongside them to help remove the barriers to that. Then next, the strategy that we are working on right here is the Pathfinders and the navigation strategies. The Pathfinders are those who seek out, find, stabilize, and connect. And you'll see here that it really is specific to some designated populations, again, those who have faced historical barriers. The navigators, navigation services, are those that focus on people who are experiencing homelessness and specifically joining them on their journey from homeless to housed. One of the things that we've gotten a lot of questions on is what is the difference between a Pathfinder for veterans experiencing unsheltered homelessness and a navigator for a veteran who is homeless. The difference there, or the key difference, is that the Pathfinder is seeking out a person who probably is not touching services, connected or enrolled to in any services, perhaps living in a tent out in the rural areas or avoiding services and systems. And we know those of you who are connected to veterans, that can be very much a part of the veteran culture, that I don't need anybody, I'm going to do this on my own. But we recognize that when you're in that situation, you can and do and deserve assistance to get through that. So they are trying to find those veterans, engage with them, get them assessed for their homeless situation, and get them on the path in the queue for homeless housing through our coordinated entry and coordinated entry for all system. The navigation side is those who pick up those who have been navigated or who have been assessed for housing, if they are not already touching someone who is their case manager through one of the other systems. There's a team that meets every week, and they case conference who's been identified this week, who doesn't have a case manager and would benefit from one. Then a navigation person, subject matter expert, can be assigned to them. Or what do we all know about this person, and what is the team that needs to come together to support them? So the navigators get their veteran assigned to them through that weekly meeting. It's part of the entire process that we have going on in our county through Coordinated Entry for All, through what's called the Veterans by Name list. If you've read the RFP, you'll see those referenced within there. Pathfinders are finding those who have probably not been connected to services or have not been connected to veteran services. We also recognize that many of these populations, they probably are touching someplace, or not probably, they may be touching someplace, but they aren't recognizing or acknowledging their veteran service. Many women don't identify as veterans for their own reasons. People who are transgender may not identify as veterans for their own reasons. Maybe they, suffered some of the military sexual trauma or alienating features of the military, and so they've kind of left that behind. However, we want to honor the veteran service through the Veterans Levy, and there are resources and dollars to do that. We then are trying to find those organizations who touch them, perhaps not because of their veteran status, but who touch them nonetheless, and create the awakening that we will ask that about our clients. When we find that out, we'll have to make the connection from our program to other programs. Ready? And RFP funding strategy. So one of the things within this is going to be specifically a Pathfinder coordinator. And this entities will be responsible for helping to implement and develop best, promising, and emerging practices in the field of pathfinding and convene that team of pathfinders on a regular basis to train and coordinate the efforts and towards the goal of creating connections between them, between the veterans, between the programs, and between the system. It's about trying to build capacity and, where it's appropriate, some consistency so that if you see this person first, you can benefit from the same resources as having seen this other person first. And that specifically in the implementation plan is strategy SS1A. SS stands for Service System Connections, Access.
Mm-hmm.
Here is the next one, a little bit more detailed, the scope of work. And a lot of this is just a repetition of what we saw. Be knowledgeable of the development, or be knowledgeable of best, promising, and emerging practices, and work with your colleagues of Pathfinders to implement those, bring them together regularly, and work in close partnership with local systems and initiatives. We will want this entities to really understand the entirety of the levy and the implementation plan well, because what we will also be trying to do is create system connections and facilitated networks that the Pathfinders will know about all the other programs being funded in the levy, so that they can make, facilitated, I keep using that word, but really making strong connections to them and have a warm handoff and a way to streamline their access to it so that it's not just what's out there, how do I know, but really making the pathways for you. The next one, the RFP funding opportunities 2 through 6. This is the doing and seeing of the pathfinding work, and again, it's specializing and serving the designated populations and connecting the individual to the community-based services. Going quickly to the next slide when we see the actual scope of work. Here it is, identify, engage, assess, and refer the veterans to programs that promote housing stability, financial stability, healthy living, social engagement, and system connections. And when you see the implementation plan, you will see that these actually are very Those are the strategies and the buckets of services that the implementation plan is framed around. These individuals will be expected to regularly attend the Pathfinder meetings because we find that when you're working together in partnership, you make greater gains together. And actively coordinate with the community partners and embrace a learning culture. The levy, even though it has been around, this is the third iteration of it. This one is vastly enhanced and increased in the amount of funding and the planning and the partnerships that have gone into it, arguably at a lot more levels. And we are learning. We have new team members, we have new staff, we are in a continuous learning process, and we ask our partners to join us in that. We pledge to be transparent. We pledge to make ourselves authentic and accountable for our mutual learning, and we want to be open to hearing your feedback as well. It is the way that we have been coached and the way that we are all embracing doing contracting work these days. It's actually, I will say, I've come through the ranks of been a provider, been a contract manager, been a planner, and this is a time that feels really new and different and very authentic to me. So it's really exciting to be working on here. The next one. Funding opportunity 7 is navigating homeless veterans to housing. This is about very specifically capturing the veterans who have already been identified, who happen to be experiencing homelessness, whether sheltered or unsheltered, and joining them on their journey from homeless to housed, helping them connect to services in the community that can stabilize them during that period, helping them with their housing search as may be possible, getting them document ready. Say they've been to a back voucher. Well, there's a lot of documentation requirements that are in place. You have to get, your DD-232 and income verification and so much more. So a navigator will help them and move them through that journey so that they can be ready when a unit. The specialization here is that someone who is highly knowledgeable about a housing search strategy, highly knowledgeable about our local homeless system and how those connections and systems are working together with coordinated entry for all, with the team that we call the Veterans Operational Leadership Team, VOLT, and working very closely. They will accept their clients upon assignment from the navigation team. And then there is also a portion in that, and it's embedded here, but it can be called out and also applied for. A portion may also be used to support the creation and maintenance of the homeless veterans by name list and contribute to the operations of the Veterans Operational Leadership Team, what I just said was VOLT, our community's effort to house homeless veterans. So that's quasi-similar to the Pathfinder coordinator, but it is embedded in this strategy, and it's working only or mostly with the homeless navigators. There will definitely be some alignment and connection work that will need to happen with the Pathfinders because there are overlapping populations. But the two teams tend to also be in the community differently, and so there may be some level of navigation or coordination that is separate and enhanced within each strategy. Let's see, next one, the funding. In the RFP, and each of you should have a copy at your seat, on page, within each of the strategies, beginning on page, beginning on page 6. Begins the discussion and the presentation of each of the strategies that we've just covered, and the particular funding level for that strategy from this year through the end of the levy. Page 8 has all of the Pathfinder population strategy funding, and page 12 has the navigation funding. Each of those is plopped in there specific to its strategy. Then if you go to the very end, page 15, it has the entirety of the funding table. So that's going to be your quick. It didn't all fit on the slide, which is why I'm referring to the RFP.
Does everyone have the Pathfinder navigation RFP? There was one that was not that RFP in the packet. So I just want to make sure everyone has the correct RFP.
Great, thanks.
One of the things that we really want to help people understand, help agencies understand through the levy is that there are not necessarily restrictions on what you can apply for or how much you can apply for. You should carefully consider the annual costs to run your program. There are startup allowances that can be provided for in the first year contract. You'll see when you download the budget, there's actually a call-out line that, startup costs. Some organizations, we've heard a lot say, well, we need a car to transport our folks from services to services. That's an allowed cost in this contract or levy. It hasn't been in many of the others. You can define and make the case for what makes your program work well and what the costs for that are, and that will be a part of a conversation that we have. There aren't any arbitrary limits. We want to make sure that people understand that, and we understand that their cultural knowledge, their cultural affiliation will help drive the services that they propose to provide. There will be both an Excel-based template that is in the ZOOMGRANTS. We ask you to draw that down, complete it, upload it back up. We'll get a quick tutorial in ZOOMGRANTS. There is also in ZOOMGRANTS a budget that we ask you to complete, and it carries backwards the high-level costs. So the total of the personnel salaries, the total of the personnel benefits, the total of the operating, the total of the training, the total of the startup. In that way, as we move towards invoicing and contracting, we are hoping to invoice through ZOOMGRANTS in the beginning, and to do that, we need to have the budget breadcrumbs laid out at this point so that we can tap back to it later on in invoicing and contracting. So it might look redundant to do both, but that's why we're asking you to do both features. Let's see, one thing that you need to acknowledge is that the 2021 through 23 funding is contingent on approval of the King County Council budget and the continued partnerships and provision of data on the program performance and implementation. This is a 5-year levy, but our King County budgets are approved on a 2-year cycle. And we fully anticipate that this will go forward the way that it has been shaped. But we know that things can happen, recessions can happen. We faced that before, so there may have to be some, refinements needed or some evaluation, and we would engage with you in partnership in that. Again, when I spoke to about this being a learning culture and a learning operation, we really seek to be strong and connected partners and transparent with you at all times. The RFP eligibility, who is eligible to apply? This is important because there was an amendment that I uploaded onto the ZOOMGRANTS. When I posted the RFP, I borrowed some language that was too narrowly constricting, and it said only 501c3s or those who are have a fiscal sponsorship by a 501c3. And we recognized that that was too narrowly focused, and we have uploaded this, and this here is the actual correct definition. But I can't go back and correct the RFP because once it was loaded, it is a public document and it's static and locked down. So what you have to do then is know that the amendment is there. In this case with you, I can highlight that this is the correct eligibility definition that we're working from. It allows nonprofits, community-based organizations, tribal organizations, public or government entities serving communities in King County. Those who currently serve veterans in King County or have a clear scope of work on a plan and intent to do so, and can provide culturally specific supports or meaningfully partner with culturally specific organizations. The contract requirements. One of the things that we are also moving towards and getting better at it day by day, year by year, is evaluation. No longer are we throwing numbers at a wall and saying, go forth, do, hit that number, but working with you collaboratively to develop your evaluation plan. What matters for this program? Oftentimes it can be milestones. It can be, we will hire someone and train them up in the Pathfinder skills. We'll hire someone who brings the subject matter expertise. We'll create partnerships, and one of the milestones will be evidence of creating those with a memorandum of understanding or agreement with that partner. We'll go, that's why we have Noah. Noah, is there something that I can put you on the spotlight to say anything what you want to about evaluating?
Yeah, no, I think Gretchen got it right on that we're going to try to really do this in the first couple months of the contract to really have time to work with all of you to really understand what success in your program looks like, and that there's ramp-up milestones, and we want to make sure we capture that work because we know it's work on the ground, and as well as client-level data that helps us answer questions about how the program's doing in a very flexible way.
Mm-hmm. Client-level data will be required. In coordination and consultation with PME, we recognize that there are certain populations for which it's extremely difficult. Not necessarily these things, but I know there are strategies that deal with domestic violence. We understand that we will not get client-level identifying information there because it's a matter of safety and life. Immigrant and refugees, there are some populations, and those served with legal supports. There's prohibitions and regulations that thou shalt not divulge the names of your legal clients. So there is some recognition of working with PME. I don't anticipate that these strategies will fall far out of the norm, but there's consultation and coordination there. We do also anticipate that in the first couple of years, our evaluation plan will be about learning and growth and just hitting some programmatic process steps. As we learn more about the clients that we see and their situations and how deep and intense a touch point needs to be to achieve success, well, towards that end, 3, 4, 5 years from now is when we might be honing in on client levels. Now we're learning. Now we can see what's going on. Now we can kind of establish that. But in the beginning, it can be more conceptual and process-oriented. Except for those, those programs that perhaps have been in operation for quite a long time under a successful model, and they can say with some assurance, based on their subject matter expertise, that they know where they're going, what some of the goals might be. We've done, let's go to the timeline, number 18. These are the important dates to know. So the RFP was released last week. We are here today at the Bidders Conference, the final, and 6 weeks later, so we are really being pretty stringent about making sure that every single RFP is open for a minimum of 6 weeks. I can't guarantee that all of them will be. There are some that can be a little more expedient and a little more narrowly focused. This one is not. And so it's the full 6 weeks of being open. We noted that there is technical assistance available for small organizations, and we have our 2 TA providers who are under contract. We pay for the time that you spend with them. They have read the RFP, they've become knowledgeable. They've worked with other applicants for other levy programs, so they understand our system, our processes, they're available. There is a definition of a small organization that needs to be minded, and that is an organization with less than 20 FTE, and the FTE is really about the hours of employment. So not just 20 bodies, but say you have 2 part-time FTE, each working 20 hours a week. Together, that's not FTE, 2 staff working 20 hours a week. Together, that's 1 FTE. So 20 or less FTE and an annual budget of less than $4 million. Because we are, we hope to see some collaborative proposals. We hope to see agencies partnering together. If some agencies want to come together and one of them is not a small organization, but the other is, that partnership is eligible for technical assistance because we want to support opportunities for the small organizations to meaningfully collaborate. The final day to submit questions is 1 week before the closing. Questions that we receive will be through the ZOOMGRANTS. You go to the Contacts tab Actually, the question comes to me, but what we'll be doing is collecting those, typing them up as the FAQ, and reloading those to the ZoomGrants page on Wednesdays and Fridays. Here during the open RFP time, I am not allowed to answer directly any questions. All questions must be public and available so that anyone can benefit from the answer, and that's why we do it. Questions go through ZoomGrants. I will be answering them in consultation with my colleagues, but then post it up to the public forum. You should be regularly checking ZoomGrants and looking for announcements and FAQs that have been uploaded. We are convening our panels right now, and actually sending out invitations. I'll get you a second. And we will have those folks coming together in early May to review them. There may be interviews. It depends on what the panel members say, like, well, this looked interesting, but we didn't quite understand this, or go find out about a little more of this. There may be interviews, notifications, we hope, by early June, so that we can be in contracting and negotiation for the bare bones of the exhibit framework in late June, with contracts beginning in early July. What we are doing within our contracts is laying the groundwork for continued development, just like Noah was saying. In the first 2 months, we will develop our evaluation plan. So we don't hold ourselves to saying we'll have everything done within 3 weeks. But what we will have is a sense of engagement and a sense of partnership that says we'll continue to work on these things together. And it may require an amendment or an attachment later on to the exhibit, and that's how we'll get that referenced in. Did you want to say something about the...
Well, maybe when we get to that slide.
Oh, you're right. That's where you built it. I'm on a roll. The RFP rating criteria is... I believe I am missing some of the... I'm going to refer instead to, from my slide, I'm going to refer to a page in the RFP because I see that it dropped a few things off. Can you go back a slide?
The next one.
Can you go back a slide?
I can go back one, yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Go forward too.
Forward.
You want to look at the next one now?
Yeah. There you go.
That's the one we want.
Oh, the one that is different. This one's right. Okay.
Thank goodness.
So there are multiple components. An organizational vision, mission story is, who are you? Who are you in the community? What makes you a leader? Tell us about the clients that you serve. Tell us about your vision and mission of what you do and why you do it. We built this in specifically because at one of our community planning sessions, we heard folks say, lots of culturally affiliated organizations are based in a storytelling mode. So give us that opportunity to share who we are before you get into these, arcane and proscriptive kinds of questions. The next thing will be population description. How are you proposing to provide the services? What will it look like and how will it benefit the people who are receiving the services? I was wrong. The population description is who will you be serving and what is your subject matter expertise in serving those folks? How do you learn from their experiences? How do you tailor your services because of their experiences? What makes you a leading expert in reaching that person and being the prime place that they go and find you, or that you go and find them? The program design description, the next one is, so how will you serve them? How will you serve them based on your history and knowledge of them? How will you acquire new skills? This is the veterans funding, so if you do not have a long history of serving veterans, how will you learn about the veteran culture and embed that in your program design? Partnerships and collaboration, 20 points. Again, we recognize that one, the levy is built on a framework and a theory that partnerships and collaborations matter, connections matter, and we all do better when we are connected together. So one, there's a specific nod there. And then two, there's an opportunity to show that your work is better and you have already convened the partners that you believe will help supplement and complement the services that you provide, give warm handoff opportunities for the people that you're serving. And there's a specific section in there in the questions. Who do you partner with? How does that happen? What are the strengths that you see that come out of it? Or what support do you need to make that happen for you? After this session today at 12:30, we'll have an open networking opportunity so that those who might be interested in creating collaborative partnerships can see who's in the room and make that connection. We'll also be hosting a web-based fillable document so that you can see who else in the community, even if they're not here today, is becoming interested in the RFP and wants to share that information with others. Equity and social justice. Again, very important, and to which the county is committed, our team is committed. How do you make your services accessible to some of the most marginalized? How do you include them in programming decisions? How does your staff and leadership support an equity and social justice model? What do we need to know about working with you? And what can you identify as changes for us so that we can be, again, dismantling some of our own barriers? Agency capacity and quality management. Are you able to track data, track finances, track the public dollars? Do you need help and technical assistance in creating those systems? Because again, we've talked about wanting to partner with some of the smaller organizations. We've acknowledged that some of those might need help building those systems. So we just ask that you let us know that so that we can be prepared to be a good partner with you. And then the budget. Are the costs reasonable? Do they support the work that you're seeking to get done? And then it becomes, like I said, the framework for invoicing later on. Together, it goes to 100 points. It's application reviewers. This is the point.
Yes, so we'll be putting together a humongous panel of reviewers since there are a lot of strategies that the things that we'd like to see represented on the review. Our community-based subject matter experts, which in our minds means people who have lived the experiences in some way of the services that are going to be provided by this opportunity. And other can apply and be a panel member to review the application. So we're hoping that you can get the word out, and if you know the people that you think might have a relevant experience to the services that this RFP encompasses, that are willing to do a review, that'd be helpful to us.
Will they be compensated?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I'm not sure of the amount. I think it might be $100 per person.
Okay.
But
Did we get that approved?
No. We'll discuss that later. I'll pay you $100. And if you have any questions, email me and letting me know that you're interested in connecting with people who might be good reviewers.
And also, there may be staff with organizations who are not applying and who have an arm's length relationship from any of the applicants, but we may be tapping into to do the reviews. This is interesting as well and new for me in my what I've experienced. When I've done RFP panels before, we have always very strictly limited review panelists to those who are government planners, nonprofit philanthropy organizations like the Seattle Foundation and all of that, and we have not had providers on the review panels. And we have recognized that that is a voice and a knowledge set that we need to have at the table when we're doing this. And so for the first time that I've seen, that's authorized now that we can present the review panel as long as there is that, very definite arm's length relationship and no conflicts of interest. And like we said, if you have people that you think would be interested and available, connect with Frank. The time commitment is not insubstantial. I just sent the dates yesterday, but towards the third week of April, we'll have a 2-hour orientation. We'll go over what's the levy, what are these strategies. We'll have an orientation to ESJ and how to read levies and not bring in personal bias, or how to be mindful of the personal biases that you will be bringing in when you review the levies, and how to try to keep those at arm's length while you're doing the review. 2 weeks after that, 1.5 weeks after that, we'll be sending out the RFPs for people to review. We hope that each get Every RFP should have at least 3 reviewers assigned to it, if not 4 or 5. We hope that each review person will see about 6, 7, maybe 8. And then the third week they'll have 2 weeks to review. And then the third week of May, we'll come back for a conversation, and people will share what their scores, they'll send the scores in ahead of time, but then they share what they read, what they thought about that, why they put the scores they did. If someone read something that, I didn't see that, that's interesting, you're right, and, and we have that conversation, and then we make recommendations to the leadership about the framing of the proposals and the funding amounts. Not the amounts, but, the funding. And which programs would rise to the top, and we see the clear system connections coming together. The technical assistance. I touched on this briefly, but again, a reminder that technical assistance is available. We have our 2 providers here, happily. You can connect with them afterwards or get their cards. Again, the deadline is Monday, April 15th. We are coming to the end of the slides, and then we can get into questions and answers. Oh, ZOOMGRANTS. Have folks here, how many have used ZOOMGRANTS before? How many is this brand new? Okay, so we have moved to the ZOOMGRANTS platform as a way to conduct all RFPs in the Department of Community and Human Services. We are finding that it actually is very accessible at a community level to fill easily. The good news and the bad news is that it prescribes certain character limits, and you have to keep your answers concise. But it actually is good because you then are free not to try to convince me about why this needs to be done. This has already been demonstrated through the implementation plan and the strategy and the planning that, yes, this needs to be done. Now you only need to spend time telling me how you would do it. So what I can share is that some of the most compelling applications are those that are the most straightforward. We do find in ZOOMGRANTS that you can only see a small snippet of your verbiage, so people tend to write in a word processing, copy and paste. All applications must be completed in ZOOMGRANTS, all questions must be completed in ZOOMGRANTS, and here is the viewer-ready, viewer-friendly URL to find it. Unfortunately, if you simply go to ZOOMGRANTS, you can't do a search in ZOOMGRANTS for King County funding opportunities. You have to know what you're looking for. You can either use that URL or you can go to our general levy page. Adam, do you want to walk people through how to navigate our general levy page?
To the like the actual interface and all that, so I can show you, I guess, an example of what it looks like. So make sure I get this full screen. So this is our kingcounty.gov/VSHSL-funding. You can also, it's also linked on our /VSHSL main page. For those on the phone, I'll make sure and include this link here in just a moment. So it has a bit of a general background on like funding opportunities, the levy in general. You keep scrolling down and you have this sort of Excel interface that shows all of our procurements. Many of you may have seen this before. And the area I'm going to call your attention to is this area that says Open Funding Opportunities. You click on that and it shows all of the current investments that are available for funding. And if you click this, View Full Screen makes it a little bit easier to look at. And this will bring up just the currently open RFPs. So if you want to look at all the levy investments, you can go back, but this is all the ones that are currently open. It shows all the details that Gretchen's gone over to an extent, and then there's a ZOOMGRANTS link on the far right-hand side. And when you open that up, it should bring up a page that shows the application. So that shows this page here. Do you want to walk through any parts in particular, Gretchen, or do you want me just to kind of?
No, I think it's just to help people become familiar and aware of it.
Yes.
I have a request for something to look at.
Okay.
Budget, you referred to 2 different spreadsheets.
Oh, yes.
I've seen one, but I wonder if we're finding the other.
Have you seen the one that you download in Excel, or have you seen the one that's in ZOOMGRANTS? Let's do both.
I'll tell you until I see one.
Let's do both. Okay, Adam, if you can go to library.
Okay, 1 second here. Library. Ooh, that like I have to hide all this stuff. And then click on.
So it is both. Oh, Adam is in there as a county employee with admin rights, so he's not seeing quite the same screenshot that you will see. But in an application screenshot, it will see applicant documents to upload. Is that what we named it? Yeah.
That's right.
There'll be a tab called applicant documents to upload. And in that tab is only one document, and that is the budget form. Can you click that open?
See budget form. This one here.
Yep.
That's going to create an Excel, and then it basically auto downloads an Excel sheet for you, and we'll open it on this page. And for those on the phone, I understand this is tougher to sort of go through, so I'll be sure to upload it with update this chat with links here in just a moment.
Okay. There are 3 tabs. One third, counterintuitively, is the budget instructions. That will talk you through what's in the other 2 tabs. But then going back to 1, personnel. This will be an opportunity to describe the people who will be involved in your project, the number of hours that they work regardless of how their hours are assigned. Then the number of hours that will be assigned to this project, their pay rate, that will give you your annual costs, how much you are requesting through this RFP to fund their position, and how much might be leveraged. Also, we have an overarching benefits dollar amount. I've just put in there, a 30% margin because that was a figure that I found on labor pages as a typical amount. So you can either use that or overwrite that. The personnel costs will carry over to the number 2 budget, the number 2 tab budget. And it carries over the salaries, the benefits, the operating, travel and mileage for staff, and training for staff, but then notice that you can also have transportation for clients. It is an eligible expense, and we've heard from many people that that is one of the program line items they plan on building in. Pass-through, if you're doing a partnership or MOA, startup costs, again allowable. This one is an example of how, someone might have filled it out. Now, if you can close that down, Adam, and I'll show for Dan where that gets carried over into ZOOMGRANTS.
I'm satisfied with that.
Okay.
I understand. Thank you.
Well, then I'll show it for Catherine.
So, do we close the application?
Yeah,
okay.
Close the Excel.
Okay.
Now, close that.
Okay.
And then when you go back to your application, where is, here, this budget.
There's a budget tab in
Budget
the
tab.
ZOOMGRANTS page.
Then I ask you just to carry over those high-level costs. Again, that will serve, the math will have been done for you in that Excel, but this will serve as potentially the future invoicing template that's on that for us if we use that tool.
This is a 1-year budget.
It's a 1-year budget, noting that startup costs are that, and then the rest are what we would anticipate to be an annual cost. Also acknowledging that the levy does plan for about a 2% COLA each year. Yes?
I'm sorry, did you say that those numbers flow over from the...
You have to hard enter them, but the math is done for you.
Got you.
So you'll be able to carry them over.
One more question.
Uh-huh.
When working on this application through the program, where there are multiple writers involved, is it possible to share this amongst the internal working staff, the actual program? I mean, how does that work?
I believe I've heard from other people that it is. I don't know that technical answer. That's a...
You're asking about ZOOMGRANTS, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there's when you first start to log yourself in and set yourself up, there's a way to, I can't remember what it's called. The collaborators, yes. They can go in and look at editing or get notifications. Yeah, so that's the example.
Gotcha. Okay. And we won't accidentally submit.
Well, that's, quite frankly, I would never recommend doing your drafts in ZOOMGRANTS. I would do it in Word.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and for those on the phone, they're recommending the C budget form is what we were looking at before, and we were recommending that you definitely answer your questions in Word before posting them actually in the application on ZOOMGRANTS.
You hit submit and you say, oh my God, I totally forgot about some aspect of the question. You can edit it later, but it's best to just wait till you think you're totally done and then hit submit.
Next to final slide, collaborative applications. Okay, partnering is not required, but we want to definitely make that opportunity available to you. After today's session, there will be a networking opportunity. We have sandwiches, so many sandwiches. I thought that we'd have about 40 people here today, so I ordered with that in mind. So there's lots of sandwiches there from specialties. We won't be here, we'll need to remove ourselves from that, but help yourself to a sandwich, stay, network as the spirit moves you. And again, we noted that we'd have that partnering document online that anyone can access at any time. And
I can show us an example of that.
Show us that.
I think I've got it set up here. Okay, so we'll make available on ZoomGrants this simple little survey tool we put together, and the purpose of it really is just so you can easily input key pieces of your information, such as your name, your organization, the type of programs you're interested in applying for, and then to be able to better describe like what types of partnerships you're looking for. So if you all want to speak to like what you expect people might put in there, that might be helpful as well. Is there anything you want them to particularly be answering in these types of like partnership questions?
This is your place and space to connect with each other. Show them what it will look like when they get.
Yeah, so then you submit it, and we decided to put it into this shareable Excel sheet. So this isn't great, but you'll be able to download it as well. And you can sort of, in a quick glance, not only be able to filter out certain organizations or certain types of applicants, such as I'm looking for people that are applying for this section of the RFP, so I'm going to look at those that filled that piece out, and then be able to read more about what type of partnership they're looking for and contact them appropriately. So this isn't the prettiest tool, but I think this at least gets us a little bit closer to being able to equitably share like all of our sort of intentions and have people that were also on the phone be able to participate in this process as well.
And that Excel document is updated pretty much instantly.
Yeah, it's pretty much every minute.
When someone fills out the survey.
Mm-hmm.
I missed where that lives.
Well,
In ZoomGrants?
We'll send it out in the communication after this, and we'll put it in ZoomGrants as well.
And I'll just, for the longest time, we have always encouraged partnership, but one of those that we've had in conversations was like, it's also important to make sure that partners get paid. Like very often people would say, oh, I refer to the so-and-so Immigrant Refugee Alliance. And it's like, but I don't pay them. And so this is the time to begin to honor the work that that organization is providing. Okay, now we're at questions.
All right.
I've been talking. I'm going to take a break from talking out loud. I'll be available. Leon's going to facilitate this portion. Our team will be available to answer those that are a little bit more technical, but 11:30.
Yeah, so we're going to, before we jump into questions, we're just going to take about a 5-minute break. So if you guys want to get up and get some food, we have an opportunity to do that. All right, if we can just bring everybody back together. What questions do you guys have? Yes, sir.
Do you see, this is specific to the navigators, people being co-enrolled in the SSVF and the navigators through the whole program, or through the whole, coordinated list?
So do we see them being co-enrolled?
Well, it feels like the navigators and SSVF have pretty similar goals and outcomes. So would they be co-enrolled in both of those programs, or?
Ideally, we want to minimize the duplication of services. That said, we recognize that sometimes an SSVF or a VA caseworker may not have access and knowledge of a veteran here and now, and maybe a navigator does, and they can create that, or that the services don't start until they actually get into housing, and what you need is someone who's working with them for the document ready phase. Okay. So that's mutual learning opportunity as we figure out the best way to allocate resources, not duplicate, but enhance.
Thank you for saying thanks for the sandwich. I understand that as we apply, we will identify communities we will be serving as opposed to being told.
Correct. And could we just repeat the question for folks on the phone as well?
Yeah, so as they apply, they will identify what communities they are going to be serving, not be told.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Liam.
Any other questions?
Just to clarify, in the budget, you would not, you sound very open to all kinds of support services and what you need. Does that include rent assistance?
I don't know if we included rent assistance in there. I don't think we did we?
It's not a definitive no, but just recognize that those dollars go fast. And there are other rental assistance dollars out there. Because I know that people brought up at the community planning or some of the others, childcare. It's like, well, it's, you know your clients, you know their needs, but just know that the dollars go fast.
Yeah, so I would, the best way to answer that, just to echo what Gretchen just said, is that I would say if there's a need in there and then you can articulate it, you can include that into your RFP. We may come back and say, no, that's not something we can support, and so if you are awarded, you may not get that included in your contract. But if there's a need there and you want to ask for that, you can definitely articulate that, and we'll take it into consideration as we look at the total package.
And can I give a friendly amendment to that answer, is that as we referenced the goal, connecting to other levy-supported programs, then what we would try to do then is facilitate and make you aware of, oh, but this program does have that. What can we do to make sure that we can, to the best of our ability, provide access to those?
So just to double clarify, the navigation piece to potential rental assistance programs, not to provide rental assistance.
Good clarification.
Could you repeat it as well, just to make sure?
Okay, so all veterans who will be receiving navigation services go first through the coordinated entry for all system and case conferencing and the assessment tool. And that is the process by which generally they get assigned a housing resource or their pathway. Either you will be, you scored a 14, you're eligible for BASH, you scored a 7, you're eligible for SSBF. You are so low scoring, we believe you can be a self-resolver or a diversion client. And in that way, they get triage towards the housing resource. So one, the navigator is not responsible for providing that housing resource, but they will come alongside with making sure that that resource can be used well. So if you get BASH, well, you're going to need to get document ready and get your DB 214 and all that. So let me help you with that part.
Okay.
Now, there may be some who are triage towards diversion or self-resolving, and what they will need is, well, I need my ARCA card. I need to get into some employment programs. I need all those things that can help me self-resolve. You may be the one assigned as a navigator that will help get those service connections and maybe help with some of the housing search strategies, but you aren't expected to perform miracles. It's either that they have a housing resource identified or they are potentially the bandwidth kind of client who can do a lot on their own and you're supplementing and enhancing driven efforts.
And can I make sure I understood your question? Is this close? Did you ask if it's meant?
Yes, that was part of it. Is it meant to provide rental assistance, and is it meant to be the connector to other programs? And no, CEA is doing that, and we're helping them.
Not no. For those who are BASH and SSBF eligible and other housing resources, they will get assigned to that. But absent that, yes, you are trying to help them figure out their connection. I need employment. I need to figure out where there's affordable housing on my own. I need help figuring that out. But having figured that out, I can perhaps do a lot of my own, or I'll need some hand-holding in these areas. So you are helping connect them to services, but you aren't necessarily providing the housing resource. You're providing the housing knowledge.
Okay. Thank you.
not totally sure, so in that scenario, I mean, it seems like the CEA is kind of sitting in the middle of so much of this. It is okay for some rental assistance to almost goes around it, so yes, there is openness with a lot of caveats to providing rental assistance with these dollars.
Can we repeat the question?
I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding.
Actual dollars paid to a landlord?
Yes.
Can you repeat the question, Gretchen?
Oh, can these dollars be used as actual rental assistance paid to a landlord to help someone get into their own housing?
Thank you.
I'm thinking no. What are your thoughts?
I'm thinking that we need to get a better hard and fast answer on this and answer that in the FAQ. We have previously said client assistance is what people know they need, but we have also saying, but those dollars live elsewhere and we don't want to duplicate streams.
Well, I'll just give you my anecdotal answer on the surface, and we will publish something this week, definitively. But on the surface, I would say the answer is no. These dollars have a very specific purpose to try and help connect people to resources, and much to Gretchen's point, there's already dollars allocated to provide those services elsewhere, and so we want to make sure that we are not blending money and that we are staying true to the initiative here and using those dollars for what we've set them aside for.
Yeah, so clarification I think would be important because I expect that it's going to.
So we will get something up this week, just official, putting that there, but just on the surface, that's where my mind's at.
And I've got a two-part question from the phone too, from Nathan. He asks, is it possible for a 501c3 entity to partner with a for-profit entity for the RFP and still be eligible for funding? If not, can a for-profit company subcontract with the 501c3 that has been awarded to fulfill the requirements of the awarded proposal?
I'll have to research that answer. I do not know.
All right, so that'll be answered in the FAQ
Yes.
and posted later this week. Thanks, Nathan.
Yes, sir.
Just returning to the rental assistance question, could your answer to that question distinguish between rental assistance, which is often eviction prevention, versus initial move-in costs, such as I've got to pay an old utility bill before they'll hook me up with my new apartment. There's different pots of money that allow somebody to rent besides paying the rent. So as long as your answer can distinguish all of those in one place, that should really help.
No, absolutely. And just, and I'll defer here in a second to Gretchen, but we have entities that do that very thing.
As well.
And so a navigator would connect them to that resource and then they would do that for them.
Okay.
I am remembering that the King County Veterans Program has hundreds of thousands of dollars in assistance. And that is the place that we would propose that you tap into for those types of needs. They can do move-in assistance, they can do debt forgiveness, get old debts and landlord debts taken care of. And I am remembering now that in the hub conversation and in the connected conversation, I did not adequately highlight the connection that we want to see with the King County Veterans Program. Can you say more about that?
Yes, but I want to make sure I get to the questions first, and then I'll come back to that.
So for the buy-in list for the navigators, did I hear you correctly? So for households that don't make it to the SSBF or VASH list, they're then referred to the navigators? So is there like a specific VSHSL score that the navigators are going to work with?
Every veteran experiencing homelessness, before who is found and has a housing assessment, goes through that pathway of the coordinated entry for all and gets on the by name list. Whether they are VASH, SSVF, a score one, or every person experiencing homelessness that touches the system and gets the assessment gets on that by name list. And then at that point, our community team comes together, the Veterans Operational Leadership Team and the other Navigator Network case conference, and they assign a resource based on knowledge of the individual, their score, and all.
Did we answer your question?
I think so.
Tracy?
Hi, we're navigators, so if you have any other questions, we can help answer them. I just want to put out my subject matter expertise, as Gretchen calls it. And then you mentioned something, Gretchen, that King County Vets Program can pay old debt to landlords, and I didn't think they could do that. Is it a case by case, or?
I think it's like the rarest.
It's rare.
Oh, okay, I will.
I want to make sure that's something.
I will
So,
clarify
old debts to
and confirm.
landlords, yes, we can do that.
In their current property, right? Not in I've been told that if they're not in that same property and they owe money to a different property, it's like the rarest. It's just kind of the language that I've always been told. There has to be like probably the only thing, and they'll get deferred for a little bit, for a while. Yeah.
Thank you for highlighting. We'll clarify in the FAQ.
Yeah, so we will definitely clarify, but just to answer the question, yes, that is something we can do in KCVP. It may be rare in some instances, but yes, we do have the ability to do that.
May I?
Yes.
So if you're using a racial equity lens in all of this, wouldn't the use of funds be impacted by that racial equity lens? And wouldn't you need some flexibility with those funds, including rent, what are you calling it? Rent, like paying off debt or
landlord debt?
Yes.
Yeah.
In order to achieve the equitable outcomes that are being sought. It just seems that all the populations are not going to be, these are very diverse populations, and if you are looking at veterans who have a criminal history, that is going to be a much more complex set of solutions than if you are a white veteran who has no criminal justice involvement. So it seems like your answers, at least for what I'm hearing, do not have that equity lens being applied to it. Question mark? Make it a question.
What I would seek to do is to help create that partnership between these organizations and KCVP, saying, hey, here's that warm connection, here's that partner connection that we are really embedding in the levy, and let's make sure that you know how to work well with each other, access each other, know your programs, know your client base, and answer the phone when you call, so that we can be partners together.
Thank you.
No more questions, I've run out of room. Just kidding, of course.
Yes, sir.
There is a specific RFP for, I think it is regarding coordination and training for navigators. Is that correct?
Yes, the coordinator piece of it.
But he said navigators, so I'm trying to figure out which one you're meaning.
But there's a specific called out RFP process for that.
The very specific one is Pathfinder.
Yes.
SS1A
I'm sorry.
is Pathfinder. Yeah.
That's right. And then there is another coordinating use of funds for coordinating and maintenance of the by name list and so forth, which is not called out as an RFP, but somehow those funds will be devoted. But that's kind of vague how those funds will be devoted. Do we apply for them, or do those just show up as administrative uses that fill in gaps as the process goes on?
I would say you apply for them based off of what you're saying the body of work is you're going to do with what you're submitting your RFP for the body of work that you want to ultimately achieve. If that's a component of that, then you put that in there, and we will consider that when we look at your total package in terms of personnel dollars. If that's a piece of the body of work that you want to own and you're asking for money to fund that, so that you can do it, then you would include that, and we would take that into consideration as we review or as the panel reviews everything. Okay. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay, so if you're applying for the one, not the coordination and training one, if you're applying for a mix of the other multiple strategies, you may serve, it's very continually to serve multiple populations. It's one budget at any point. The provider is not expected to I don't think, to try to request particular amounts of money from each pot. You guys are going to deal with that on the back end? Question mark?
It is actually, no, exclamation point.
You need to specify.
Specific dollars?
Yep. So say you want to apply for Veterans of Color Pathfinding. That is a specific application with a budget with a dollar request. Say you want to apply for women and transgender veterans. That is a specific application with a budget with a dollar. Yeah. Because the reason for this is that when this was presented to the King County Council, it had these strategies, and we have really strong reporting requirements. We have to report back against these strategies very specifically. And so for this reason, we need the contracts and the applications to be that specific as well.
So just to take that a step further, so we're doing it as, excuse me, we're putting it out as one RFP, right? But to Gretchen's point, they're all individual strategies that have different funding lines tied to them, which is why we need you to call out what population you're serving, what strategy you're applying for funds against. You could do a blend of those, or you could pick one and say this is the only one that we're going to do and request funding.
Are each of those categories then we have a budget associated with that line item?
Yes, I realize. Yes, I'm so glad this question came up. Let's look at the RFP starting on.
The one where they're all listed?
Yep. Page 6, section C, this request, funding opportunities 1 through 7.
Going back into that.
Yeah, I'll pull it up here so we can. Page 6.
Page 6, section C, funding opportunities 1 through 7. So this acknowledges that there are 7 very distinct strategies combined in this RFP. You need to submit a separate application for each strategy. You can repeat information that's consistent across all, like my agency's fiscal systems, my agency's data management systems. We don't want you to have to redo too much work, but we do need to align the ask with the strategy.
Narrative questions and budget, separate for each one?
Yes.
Okay.
In any particular investment, it's conceivable more than one entity would be funded for that, such as Veterans of Color. With the evaluation process, it sounds like it will begin with organization defining its own benchmarks or signs of progress or measurables. Or will they be brought to some sort of common data set and everybody will be reporting on it? So
yeah, so that'll be, I would say that'll be done in partnership between us and our different partners, too, as well as with PME, and that's what Noah was kind of alluding to before, to define what those measurables are and what those benchmarks are, because we fully recognize that we may get a new partner that is going to take longer to get up and running. So those benchmarks to get them up and going are going to be different than somebody who's potentially a larger organization already well established doing that work. They're going to be in a different place. So it won't be a cookie cutter approach in terms of what we measure and how, with each partner, and it's really, I'm gonna say, be a partnership and collaboration to figure out what that looks like to get towards success for each individual partner.
Would it probably still have a common data set, or?
I would say so.
Yeah, I think where possible, we have two reasons for really wanting to. We've got this opportunity to have like really a learning network through a set of providers funded by this RFP. So we do, when possible, want to think about some common measures of success so that we can be talking about that together and learning like what's the impact we're making together, and then to share that out to the community to communicate what's the impact we're making together on these strategies. But we know that we want to actually reflect what's going on at each program, so we'll try to strike that balance.
Yeah, and just a caveat on that, with one other piece, I would say historically we've done more of a quantitative base, just looking at numbers, and we are going to be shifting in the future to start to look at more qualitative, and so that's a major shift for us, and so there's going to be that. So it's not purely how many people are you serving, how many people did you get to housing or anything like that. We are looking for potentially surveys and are we making a difference? Are we having an impact? So really getting after that qualitative piece.
So the dollars are itemized pretty specifically for each target population in the Pathfinder services. In terms of the scope of services with regards to specific populations?
Can you further clarify that?
Well, actually, I mean, the veterans and military families in the first half year of 2019 is 68 and change. American is 200,000. Is there a reason, does that imply something about the scope of Pathfinder services that are intended for each population?
Some of the reasons for the dollar differences in that first year is because we have some systems and services that are being provided here that were being funded through the old levy. We didn't want to just end those without new services in place to pick those up. So there are some services being funded right now for family outreach, pathfinding. And so the difference that you're seeing there in that funding table from what's here versus what you might have seen in the implementation plan is the dollars that needed to sustain that contract during this interim period.
But I also see differences in the total for the amount, and maybe that's because of residual funding, carryover funding as well.
I don't have a good answer for you. I know that to your question, some things are more heavily funded than others. I'm not off the top of my head. I'm not sure. Going back to the reasoning, I think just anecdotally, for me, that we recognize that with some of the populations that they haven't had this or that there may be a greater need, so that we allocated dollars to those things to try and make sure that there's a focus and an emphasis to help bridge the gap in those areas.
That would make sense. I mean, there's a historically underserved population where there has not been existing programs and services. You want to make additional investments.
And so that is my answer based off of my read and going through it, but I do not have the textbook answer. The vote was made, and this is, I don't have that, which is why I'm kind of like sidestepping it a little bit. But holistically, I think that's the intent of the levy, is to help bridge those gaps. And so where you see disparity in terms of dollars and population, I would argue that that's why we've identified greater gaps in some of those areas, and that's why.
Thank you.
So kind of looking at the breakdown between the Pathfinder pot and the Navigator pot, it's pretty clear that I think based on this, it's kind of drove why there's more funding pathfinding versus navigation. Is that fair to say?
Just dollar-wise?
Yes. Okay, so then curious why or what was the data driving navigation services kind of more broadly?
What was it? So I think the unfortunate answer is that this is also a product of the King County Council, and so when the executive submitted his proposal, certainly the data came from currently contracted experiences, focus groups we held with folks to hear like what sort of areas that are still underserved, and we kind of kept hearing that there's this massive amount of resources available, and for some reason people who have been disconnected just cannot get to it. So I don't want to say there's a specific like ROI analysis to the $100,000 number, but there was a sort of overall feeling we kept hearing from folks who had lived experience going through these types of services that like just having somebody to tell me where I get access to and knowing that I'm going to the right door with the right information was just this overall theme. So this is to some extent a kind of a hopeful guess at what would maybe sort of get us closer. But I don't want us to get you thinking that we had like a chemistry set and we sort of figured it out from there.
Yeah, and I just want to say this in, I guess, the simplest terms I know how, and hit me or yell at me if I'm going
You're doing a great
astray.
job. No, you're doing a great job.
This is our best crack at trying to get this right.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a perfect science. We think this will work, but part of the reason we're going to be flexible in contracts is we fully recognize that we may get into this and we may need to pivot and make adjustments to better serve our population.
Yeah.
So that's why I just really want to emphasize collaboration, partnership is key here. We hope, we believe that this is the answer. We may get into this and realize that, hey, you know, our theory here is off in these areas and we need to make some adjustments. But there is no golden compass, analytical aha moment that we found and said that based off of X, Y, and Z, this is the right answer. It's in large part due to all the feedback we've been getting from people saying, we have the resources, but nobody's coming. We need help, but we don't know where to go.
Right. Well, my question, I guess, is, you know, clearly there are priority populations that are being missed, and so that's why the Pathfinder is broken out this way. But I don't see that same focus for the navigators, so I'm just curious, like, what specifically is trying to be addressed through, including the navigators at all, really, when, you know, it just seems really clearly that the priority right now is on Pathfinder.
Yeah, so I think the difference there, and correct me, is we've been doing navigation, we really haven't been doing pathfinding.
Sure.
And so what we heard from all of our navigators is that pathfinding was a need, and so this is our first crack at it.
Right. So, but including more navigation means that people were still asking for more navigators? Is that kind of
I think it was also that when we spoke with people who had been through navigation or who were navigators, they did have success whenever they were able to engage with the client. It's just that they weren't always aware of where the clients were. And so it's another issue of, again, like these people who are skilled in providing a certain resource do not know where the community needs them at, and thus they're great at helping the clients that they can engage with, but that is only one sect of the entire population.
Because the original navigator definition.
Sorry, it's a live webinar, so.
We find them, we assess them, we hand them off, right? So we realize that there is a subset of the population who is homeless who really needs that case management. That you need to engage them for months at a time in order to get them. So am I speaking correctly? I think that's also part of why navigation is where it is now.
Yeah.
And it was, it's almost like Tracy was saying, we used to call them navigators, and they did soup to nuts, A to Z.
Yeah.
And we recognize that, wow, that is an intensive body of work, and there is, we believe, taking a crack at it this way, value in finding, setting them through the CEA and using that as the connection point for the hand-holding later on. Because this required such deep subject matter expertise in housing, and this required a lot of subject matter expertise in finding, and we were asking people to do a lot. And so let's use people where their passion is, where their knowledge is, and not stress them out and strain them, asking them to perform miracles from find to house. Give them something more manageable.
There's one question here as well.
I have a question. Kind of a catch-22. Say there's a veteran that you've been helping within the King County area. That veteran decides to go into Pierce County and stay for a while and then come back into King County. With that time lapse, how have they outgrown the system or been put out of the system where they were at?
So, just so I can make sure I'm understanding your question, you're servicing somebody who lives in King County, and then at some point they decide to move out of King County, Pierce County, wherever, and then later on they decide to come back to King County. Do they lose access to resources?
Yeah.
Or if they're living in King County, they have the same access to the resources.
Okay, so would their status be the same as what it was when they first started, or would they start all over again?
Question. I think it's really case dependent, dependent on the person's scenario. I would just say that I hope to be in a position where we can track that closely if somebody decides to move to Pierce County for a couple months or whatever and then decides to move back. I don't think we're there yet, so I think, honestly, if somebody moves to Pierce County and comes back, it'd be unbeknownst to us, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm.
If we find out the information that somebody is now residing in King County, and it was somebody that we were looking to provide service, or somebody now resides in a different county and we were looking to provide services for them within King County, and we find out they no longer reside, then I would say they would probably fall off the list or fall to the back of the list. And then when they come back to King County, they have equal access to those opportunities, and their place in line may have adjusted because they've left, but we're still going to work just as hard to make sure that their needs are met.
Okay, so like I was saying, homeless people don't always stay with the same county, so, you know.
Yeah, but to that extent, like, I pray, we're not that good yet at it. And so if somebody's homeless in King County, then they move to Pierce County and they're homeless in Pierce County, and then they come back to King County and they're homeless in King County, we're gonna service them. And I don't think we have a system currently in place that tracks to the extent of where people are homeless that timely. Anybody correct me if I'm not speaking the truth here.
Serving them in King County.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Mona, your question reminds me that a wonderful thing about the levy is discharge status does not matter. So someone can have any manner of discharge status and be served.
This is so easy. I love the question. So when they're doing the budget, because it's for 3.5 years, the budget they present is a 2019 figures, specifically on like salary, and then you will increase off of that. You don't want like a 3-year average.
Correct.
Another question. Does overhead costs come in with that budget?
There's a line for it. There's both operating costs, which is like, your rent, your copier, and all of that. And then there is also a line for what some organizations call intra-agency admin or overhead, and that's what you typically pay to your HR department, your IT department. Those that don't, like rent would be like what would be the program rent. And then the intra-agency is your HR, your executive director, your IT, which is the additional for those who don't like touch services and programs, but it still takes the organization to operate.
So on that note, I just wanted to clarify something that was mentioned earlier. So in partnerships, if you're planning on submitting multiple agencies together, that's one RFP that you're applying on together. Don't know definitively yet, but we will put clarification out. We're more than likely, I won't even say more than likely, we may require contracting separately with each entity. So one RFP with partners together, but when we actually get to a contracting point, it'd be with each individual. And so I'm going to get clarification on that today and we'll put that out. But I'm fairly certain that that's where we're at versus one contract with everybody as well. Does that make sense?
So along those lines, if you're going to do that and there are two budgets, you still want one budget and the subcontractor showing up just in your contract line? Or do you want two budgets for the two partners?
We'll answer that.
So applying for more than one category, if you will. So they're separate proposals. So it would be the proposal and the budget, proposal and budget, proposal and budget.
Can we hear that answer audibly?
Oh,
yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you, Adam.
Piggybacking on that, so it's just the same application you're going to submit 2 or 3 different times, how many you're doing, or is it going to be a separate one inside ZOOMGRANTS for each time you do it?
The process is the same, but it should be tailored because there's different populations.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So just to clarify, if I'm targeting a population of women who are LGBT or transgender, whatever, veterans, then that I can have one for this segment and another one for male veterans who are Marines and another one for male veterans who are with the Air Force.
Not within the strategy. Okay. Just within the strategy.
If I may,
yeah.
Remember that the population description is worth 20 points. And so you will want to reflect how and why you know each of these populations really well and specific to their needs, this B through F, and why you are well situated to serve them based on their lived experience.
We talked about this once before, Gretchen, but just want to clarify that unsheltered homelessness in this CEA world, in that language, with the Xbox, all that, that means that they are not in shelters. But that's not what you're saying. What you say when you say unsheltered homelessness is not permanently housed without housing.
I'm glad you brought that up. There is a distinction between who the Pathfinder finds and who the Navigator serves.
Right.
And the Pathfinder is seeking unsheltered homelessness, if only because once they've gone to a shelter, that shelter should be doing the assessment tool. Should be. So they should be having access to the by name list through their shelter, or if you can, let me FAQ that about whether we can in those cases where, yes, they're going to that shelter, but they have no resources to do the assessment.
Yes, that is happening all the time.
Okay.
So if you could, yeah, that would be good.
Okay, and then once we get to the Navigator, HS4, it does not restrict unsheltered because it acknowledges that people will be residents, and they, when you go through that system, that is the wide population that you're serving afterwards.
Okay. If the priority population for our agency is women of color, how would we decide which group between the women veterans and the veterans of color. There's one vehicle to see where we would place this.
We can't make that determination for you.
So what we do?
That is up to you to decide what you want to put in for based off of the descriptions in the RFP and based off of your narrative in terms of the population you're looking to serve. These are the populations we've identified that have dollars aligned to them, and so we would ask you to go based off of this and pick based off of what populations you guys are going to go after and articulate that.
Are you asking like, will you be punished because you fit between two?
Well, or we're too specific in women veterans that our focus isn't broad enough, and therefore we're docked for that.
Right.
For veterans of color, we're only going to hit a portion of that population. Is that not good enough?
So I just want to say that we want people to put in for what they believe they can do, and they can do it well. Don't just try and tell us what you think we want to hear.
Yeah.
We want you to because we're going more for a qualitative versus a quantitative, we're heavily focusing on making sure that we are servicing the population well versus just trying to achieve a certain magic number out there that somebody said. So that may be that if you've historically received funds from the levy, maybe you're asking for more funds and servicing less people because you're doing it in a different fashion than you've historically gone about it in order to provide a better service. That's okay. We want to know that. We want you to paint that picture so that we're getting that information. But don't feel like if you're not going to serve enough of a high enough number in a particular population group that means you'll be looked at negatively. We fully expect that there's going to be some entities that put in for this that are going to serve as a smaller geographic area, maybe out in a rural area, and those are entities that we are interested in funding, provided that they can, go through and articulate and say what population they're going to serve and meet all the requirements, so on and so forth. Did I answer your question?
Just going back to the definition of unsheltered, and I thought there was an answer here and I couldn't find it. Is there like HUD blanket verification of that, or like what is the definition of unsheltered?
Do we have it in the RFP or no?
Not definitively. It would, someone who, will see whether that needs to be defined more specifically, especially in light of Kelsey's question. And I think it would be, the veterans self-report.
Yeah, that's kind of
And there's so many people that don't get connected to CA that stay in shelter regularly too. So that would be my advocacy, I guess, is to include that a little bit.
Yeah, our goal will not be the shelter police,
Yeah.
just like Leon said, we're not that good yet.
Yes, sir.
I really like this concept and the number of pathfinding approaches and all that is coming out. It kind of has the look of a model where the size of the big end of the funnel got bigger. And then I guess my question is going to the question of is there any concept of what a navigator caseload would end up being with more and more people being found and the number of navigators being fairly static?
I don't have an answer for that. I don't think so. I don't think we have that information, and I think that's part of the reason why, as we look at our measurables for the first year to 2 years, it's really trying to figure out, okay, what are those benchmarks? What does this look like now that we're actually doing it? And so that's the information we're trying to find out and get after. Yes, ma'am.
Well, essentially, we apologize, but we have to make decisions about priorities. I'm Dagmar Khan, Patricia Barker. We're from the South Park Senior Center. We clearly have no capability. We're very small, small budget, but serving populations that are very low income, that are 60% people of color, that many, you can go through the demographics and we've got them. It looks to me like in order for us to do what we would like to be able to do, somebody would have to adopt us for each one of the funding categories, because we hardly have any of one of the other of them, but we are not serving our veterans. So I guess it's not exactly a question, but I guess it is, do we need to be partnering with a number of different people in order for us to reach each one of the groups that we would like to be able to reach, even those small numbers each? Does that make sense?
I'm not going to tell you you have to partner with anybody, but that's an option. And another option is to, you said you're not servicing veterans now, but another option is to request funds and come up with a plan to how you will serve veterans in the future. And so I think you have both ends of the spectrum, and you can go for either course of action there. But I can't say which one you should choose, but that would be mine.
And we do have the space reserved for any connections that may need to be made after this bidders conference as well.
Any other questions?
I think I just got a little confused on, I would like a little more information. When you were going through the funding opportunity and for the HS4 funding, you were talking about how you can also, this seems like an ad, you can propose being part of the VOLT team.
You can propose having a facilitative leadership role that's connected to the VOLT team. If you look at the language that's really specifically in the implementation plan, that is a sentence that's in there, and so it carries that through in this opportunity. We leave it to organizations to say, I have an idea for how that could work, and support the capacity of our navigator team, support and strengthen the system. It's an opportunity built into the levy language. And because we have to stick to the implementation, or I just should say it's built into the implementation plan language. And because we are guided by the implementation language, that's where that lives.
Did she answer your question?
I am not sure. I don't. and it is sort of. This is my lack of knowledge. Does VOLT exist?
Yes.
It does exist.
It does exist.
It is real.
So what does that mean to be part of a facilitated leadership role?
Let me see if VOLT is defined in the definitions.
Nice.
Pardon?
We have a mission statement.
VOLT has a mission statement.
Yeah, simultaneously, isn't it?
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Short.
Definition at the back. Remember that in the RFP.
Are there any questions from the phone? Folks haven't spoken up yet.
And so that is a community-based collective impact, combined arms effort to really reduce and end veteran homelessness. It's predicated on partnerships with VA, SSVF, our local partners, nonprofits, state, and they have really just joined arms, come together to reduce and end veteran homelessness.
So just much to that point, you're going to see this a lot especially as we roll out contracts. There's going to be a large emphasis put on working together versus in silos. Mm-hmm. And so wherever we can bridge the gaps between agencies to work together collaboratively towards our desired insight. We're going to try and spell that out so that we have it. Volt is a component of that. That's a group that comes together to spearhead a lot of these issues. And so if in your write-up, as Gretchen was discussing, you have great ideas and you want to, for instance, just theoretically say, hey, we want to have an FTE that's focused on, or half their time focused on helping manage that, being a liaison to Volt, etc. That's something that you could spell out in there. Any other questions? Gretchen, Frank?
No questions for me.
We'll circulate for Dagmar. I know you came in late too. We'll circulate this digital way to share and get to know other applicants or other people that are interested in applying. It shows you like areas they're interested in applying, what types of funding they're looking for. It might be another really great way to sort of align yourself with others that you may be interested in working with.
And so I just wanted to, can you scroll so you can see the different areas?
Any particular piece? So
Just the different,
this one up here we're looking at before. This one here.
Oh my gosh, he's
So just last thing that I wanted to bring up, just so that we can be very transparent with this. Gretchen talked about the big pot of money that is essentially all these dollars rolled up. We are going to be very conscious of what people are putting in funds for. And so I'm not saying that this would happen, but if it did, if nobody put in for like women veterans and transgender veterans SS1B and everybody just put in for everything else, we would hold back those funds.
And reprocure.
And so we are being very thoughtful to make sure that we cover the full spectrum and that everybody puts in and that we get all these different buckets covered. If we don't, we're not just going to redistribute those funds elsewhere. So I just wanted to be very clear with that.
Well, it brings me back to the question from over there. If like everyone's putting in for, veterans of color and you're serving women veterans of color and no one applies for women veterans, I mean, that gives you an opportunity there to potential that. I'll leave that to you guys, but it kind of gets to the heart of the question over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question over there.
Did you have a question, sir?
Yeah. So, making sure I understand your response. If 4 of the 5 items are one, and the 5th one's not, none of them will be.
No, we'll still award for the 4, but we will re-procure for the one that is not.
Okay.
We won't cut it up into pieces and put it in other.
Yeah, we're not just going to say, well, nobody put in for this strategy, so we're going to divvy out those dollars to everything else. We're going to go back and re-procure that strategy.
Okay.
That makes sense?
That answer, yes.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying that nothing would be.
Oh, no.
So I'm curious how you came up with the dollar amounts for each silo of dollars.
Great question.
Talk to your council member.
I don't have an answer for how the dollar amounts were decided on putting the exact individual dollar amounts into each bucket.
You disappoint the mathematician.
I'm sorry.
Do you have a final one?
Yeah, so, I mean, are we not allowed to submit essentially the same proposal for 2 different of those categories? If we do have, we can.
Yeah. We're not, it's not going to be,
Let me try to answer that a little clearer. Definitely you can. And you can repeat the information that's consistent across both of them. But remember that population description gets you 20 points. And you will want to refine how you are
Going to service those
going to
populations.
service that population.
Right.
So, I mean, just a very simplistic answer. If you put in for the veterans of color, right, and you write your RFP for that, and then you cut and paste it and you put it into veterans and military families, and we read it, it's going to read veterans of color because you didn't adjust it to veterans. So you need to tailor it to the populations that you're going to serve.
But it shouldn't be duplicated.
It's not intended to be very duplicative, but
Is your question like, and if I get Veterans of Color funding and I get military families funding, do I get to count them under both?
Well,
when you get to counting clients?
Just, sorry to like take your example, but just like Veterans of Color, women veterans, we're serving women of color. We apply to both. We serve women of color, same bucket. But you can't. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
yeah, so you pick a bucket. If
Pick
you want,
one, don't do both for the same group.
or you could do both. And
We're not going to tell you.
yeah,
We're not going to give you the
We're
answer.
not going to tell you what you have to pick a bucket. But if your target is women veterans of color, and you want to ask for X amount of funds out of the women's veterans bucket and X amount of funds out of veterans of color, you could do that. If you want to just say women's veterans and ask for all the money out of women's veterans, you can do that. If you want to just say veterans of color and ask for all the funds out of veterans of color, you can do that. So it's up to you and how, if you want to do that or not. We're not going to tell you which strategy. If there's a potential blend to where people can qualify in multiple of those buckets, how to go about asking for those dollars. That's at your guys' discretion.
And I'm guessing it's up to us to track it.
At the end, when it comes to reporting?
Well, yeah, and the reporting piece of it, that's a whole nother.
Let's not talk about that right now.
Whole other deal. And again, that's, when we look at measuring and what that looks like, that'll be the conversation between us and setting those benchmarks with PME to figure out what that's going to look like for each individual part. Because our intent also there is to not really be duplicative with the information that we're gathering. At least not duplicative in areas where it doesn't make sense.
Super easy question. Is there any advantage, it doesn't show up in the rating criteria, but is there any advantage in your budget of showing the leverage, showing the other dollars, and showing this as part of a bigger program?
I want to say there's an advantage or disadvantage to that.
Can you repeat that question?
Is there an advantage to showing any leverage in the budget, or that this is part of a larger program serving more people than these dollars? It's isolated.
I would say that the advantage could be when you define the geographic area that you're serving, and if that is an area that is not currently being serviced, or as we look at the other RFPs that we received, if you're servicing an area that is not being serviced by any of the other applicants, that could potentially be a strength in an application, because our intent is also to service all of King County, and that's a component of it as well. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
It's 12:30.
12:30. What we will do is step out for an hour. I'm going to put my cell phone number on the wall so that as the last person leaves, you can text me and let me know so that we can come back and clean up. Although you do have to leave by 1:30.
And has everyone signed in?
Yeah, if you haven't signed in, please do so, and we'll make sure to post all the information recorded today and the answers up on ZoomGrants as well. So, thank you.